appreciate.
My good old friend Mohan Goswami, Vijay Reddy Garu. Actually, I should say all Reddy Garus on the dais. They all are Reddy. So all Reddy Garus on the dais, ladies and gentlemen. I want to start by remembering two people. First, the lady after whom this auditorium is named, the Indira Priyadarshini Auditorium. Indira Gandhi was India's first and last Prime Minister to take environment as a passion. It was not a political issue for her. It was an issue of passion for her. And throughout her life, we think of Indira Gandhi as the politician, but she actually never wanted to be a politician. She wanted to be a naturalist. She was a bird watcher. She was a passionate wildlife lover. She was a child of the mountains, and she felt most comfortable in the company of nature. And it's very appropriate that we are releasing this book in an auditorium named after Indira Gandhi, Indira Priyadarshini. The second person I want to remember is Jaipal Reddy Garu. Because Jaipal Reddy never understood why I was so bothered about the environment. He always used to call me and say, Jairamji, you know, this obsession you have for the environment is too much. He and I never agreed. But I am so happy that in the last book that Jaipal Reddy Garu wrote, 10 Ideologies, he devoted one chapter to environmentalism. And I called him when the book was released. He sent me a copy of the book, and I said, Jaipal Garu, you have converted. You are now beginning to take environment seriously. So he said, you know, I'm a student of Marx, I'm a student of Nehru, I'm a student of Rajaji. None of them, for them, environment was not a big issue. For them, it was imperialism, development, economic growth, socialism. But I am now beginning to understand that you cannot have growth without environmentalism. So his last book, in many ways, shows the distance Jaipal Reddy Garu traveled. He was a man of strong opinions, but as strongly he spoke, as patiently he listened. That was his greatness. He spoke forcefully, but listened deeply. And you could argue with him. And he was Urban Development Minister in 2009. I was Environment Minister. And I went to see him. And I said, Jaipal Garu, I need a favor from you. He said, what can I do for you? I said, I need to build a new office for the Ministry of Environment. Because this office of the Ministry of Environment is the most environment unfriendly building. And I want to build India's most environment friendly building. And I want 2.5 acres of land. So he says, 2.5 acres of land, very difficult. That too in Lutyens, Delhi. How can I give you 2.5 acres of land? If I give it to you, 20 people will come and want it. So I said, well, you know, Jaipalji, I want to ensure that this building gets built, and I want to call it Indira Paryavaran Bhavan. So he said, in that case, I will sign the file right now. He called for the file, he signed the file, and today those of you who may, I don't know how many of you have seen the office of the Ministry of Environment and Forests. It is India's greenest building. And as you enter the office, as you enter that ministry, you will be greeted with an ancient Sanskrit saying, part of which I saw written here on the wall. Prakriti rakshati rakshataha. Prakriti rakshati rakshataha. Nature protects those who protect it. This was Indira Gandhi's favorite quotation. And I saw somewhere written here, Vriksho rakshati rakshataha. It was, the original was Prakriti rakshati rakshataha. So I want to remember these two great people who are intimately associated with today's program. Now, when Mr. Lakshman Reddy and Mrs. Lakshman Reddy came to see me, I was delighted because, as Mohan mentioned, we know about the Western Ghats. We talk about the Himalayas, we talk about Aravalis, we are concerned about Shivaliks, we are worried about Sundarbans, we are worried about Northeast, but Eastern Ghats, nobody even knows, let alone concerned about. There are reasons for this. It's a very fragmented landscape. There are demographic pressures, much more on the Eastern Ghats than on the Western Ghats. In fact, Mrs. Lakshman Reddy said, Jal, Jungle, Jameen or Janwar. But पांचवा ज भी है, जल, जंगल, जमीन, जानवर और जन. जन के बिना कोई नहीं होता, कुछ नहीं होता. So we should not forget the fifth j. The fifth j, Jan, you and me, are both the problem and the solution. We create the problem and we have to find the solution. So Eastern Ghats is a special ecosystem. And the first time I became aware of the Eastern Ghats after I became minister was when the bauxite mining issue came up in Arku Valley. And I spent a couple of days in Arku Valley. Then I met my friend Tulsi Rao Garu. And after that, I became interested and much more aware. I have to admit, I too was more worried about Western Ghats and Himalayas and Sundarbans rather than the Eastern Ghats. But we started to take some initiatives. Bauxite mining, I think there is a moratorium now on bauxite mining. India's largest tiger reserve was created. And a lot of such small measures got taken. But I think this is the first time that I have seen a systematic report on the Eastern Ghats. And I want to congratulate Lakshman Reddy ji and Mrs. Lakshman Reddy and all her colleagues, all their colleagues for this labor of love. It really is an education, and I am sure this report will do to the Eastern Ghats what the Gadgil Committee report did for the Western Ghats. And now that I am chairman, I'm no longer minister, but I'm chairman of the Standing Committee on Environment and Forests, I have promised Lakshman Reddy ji that we will take up the Eastern Ghats for intensive study, just as we have studied Western Ghats, and now a notification is being issued by the Ministry of Environment for protection of the Western Ghats. Just as we have studied the Himalayan ecosystem, we should now, the time is ripe now for concrete actions on the Eastern Ghats, for which we will have to bring Odisha, Andhra, Telangana, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu on board. It's going to be a difficult exercise. However, in the next couple of months, I would like to assure you that the Standing Committee will take this report on board very seriously, and we will try to come up with certain recommendations for the government to implement for the protection, restoration and regeneration of the Eastern Ghat ecosystem. I think one point that my friend Tulsareddy just mentioned, and Mohan Guruswamy also indicated, people in India don't know that geologically this is the oldest habitat in the subcontinent. Geologically. We are all aware of how eco-sensitive the Western Ghats is, the rainforest, and of course Indira Gandhi made it world famous by her decision to stop the Silent Valley project in the Western Ghats. But I think the time has come for us to acknowledge and appreciate the geological significance of the Eastern Ghats, quite apart from its ecological value. There is an ecological value and there is a geological value as well. There is also, after climate change, the concern of coastal protection, coastal areas. We have a long coastal area, and as you know, the Bay of Bengal coastal area is far more vulnerable than the Arabian Sea for a number of scientific reasons. Cyclones are far more endemic on the eastern coast of India than, say, they are on the western coast. So from an ecological point of view, from a geological point of view, and from a climate change point of view, the Eastern Ghats is very significant. It requires action by the state governments concerned. It also requires determined action by the central government, the Ministry of Environment and other ministries. And I assure you that we will use the Standing Committee forum to push for this action. It's not going to be easy, I can tell you. From my own experience with the Western Ghats, it's not going to be easy because state governments do not instinctively support conservation activities. There is a mining lobby, there is an industrial lobby, there is a construction lobby, there are highways to be built, broad gauge lines to be set up. So, and of course there is the pressure of people, the demographic pressure. So it's not easy for state governments, as we have seen in the case of the Western Ghats. So it is not going to be easy convincing these 6 or 7 governments to have regulations for the protection of the Eastern Ghats. But I think with raising public awareness, greater consciousness amongst civil society organizations, it is possible to create an environment in which Eastern Ghats eco-restoration becomes a priority area. I want to congratulate the entire team, because this is an effort not of the government, But this is an effort of concerned citizens. And it's very difficult in our country to find such initiatives. Governments prepare reports, very nice reports, but it's very difficult for individuals, concerned individuals, NGOs, civil society organizations, to put in the time and effort and the resources. And it is really a magnificent book. Not only does it display the wildlife, the biodiversity, the medicinal plants, the various aspects of the ecosystem of the Eastern Ghats. So I am delighted that I had this opportunity of releasing this book, and I look forward to working with all of you to taking this report forward, to bringing the protection of the Eastern Ghats on the national agenda as much as the Western Ghats or Himalayas or Sundarbans is, and putting pressure on the state governments to pay greater attention to regeneration and restoration of rivers, wetlands, forests, grasslands. You know, these ecosystems are very varied. It's not just forests we are talking about. Wetlands, for example, are under severe threat all over the country. If you remember, one of the largest wetlands in India was the Koleru wetland, and there was so much of debate and controversy on the Koleru wetland. So the wetlands have to be preserved, the grasslands have to be preserved, the forests have to be preserved, the rivers, of course, have to be preserved. So we have an ambitious agenda ahead of us, but I think with the cooperation of the people, with the cooperation of students, civil society organizations, we should be able to put pressure on governments to be far more sensitive to ecological issues. Because as Indira Gandhi once said, that economic growth without ecological balance is meaningless. You cannot pollute your way to prosperity. You cannot deforest your way to prosperity. So we need a balance between environment and development. And we need to once again remind ourselves, Prakriti Rakshati Rakshata. Let me end by saying that India has a great legacy when it comes to nature. There is no civilization that respects nature as much as Indian civilization does. Western civilization is based on man's conquest of nature. Indian civilization has been based on man living in harmony with nature. We worship our rivers. Gange che Yamune che Narmada Saraswati Godavari Narmada Sindhu Kaveri Jale Yasmin Samidam Kuru. We pray to our rivers. And I don't know how many of you remember the old Raj Kapoor song of the 1950s. I'm sure Mohan will remember. गंगा मेरी माँ का नाम, बाप का नाम हिमालय. अब तुम ही बताओ मैं किस देश का रहने वाला. We define ourselves in relation to the Himalayas and the Ganga. Which civilization in the world, the most popular god is Vakratundam? What is Vakratundam? Curved trunk. And what is this Vakratundam's carrier? A mouse. Durga. Have you seen the calendars of Durga? You have Durga riding a tiger. You have Durga riding an elephant, lion. We worship animals. We worship rivers. We worship our mountains. Yet, we ignore them. Those whom we worship, we ignore. Our rivers are polluted. Our mountains are degraded. Our wildlife is being exterminated. Biodiversity is under attack. So somewhere we have forgotten our own culture. We don't need advice from anybody else on how to protect culture, because protecting culture, protecting nature comes naturally to us in India. Our most famous Upanishad is called Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, the Upanishad of the great forest. This is our civilization, and this is what we have to recapture. We must realize that our own culture has taught us respect for nature. Our own culture teaches us respect for biodiversity. And I think by protecting ecosystems like the Eastern Ghats, we are not only protecting nature, but we are also protecting our culture. Nature plus culture. You know, Mr. Venkaiah Naidu is a very great, when he speaks, he comes up with these wonderful one-liners. In Parliament, he will say, if you cooperate, I can operate, you know, and he will say this bill is a pill that will kill. So one day, Mr. Venkaiah Naidu was giving a speech, and he said, nature plus culture is equal to future. Very nice. Nature plus culture is equal to future. And I think we should make a beginning in the Eastern Ghats. Thank you.